The Congregational Church of Rupert sits near the intersection of routes 315 and 153 in the village of Rupert, not far from the New York state line. Established in 1786, it's the oldest continuously operating church in Vermont, and many ministers have served here. History fills the church building. On a recent visit, Gene Higgins, a local resident and historian of the area, pointed out the slate floor in the church's basement, where local Rupert residents were sworn into the Union Army during the Civil War.
We paid our volunteers $100 in cash. That way their family was taken care of and they could keep their land while they were. So we had, I think, 3 or 4 meetings here, and they did send 60, I believe, 60 odd volunteers into the war. And the troop trains used to come down through the station. The railroad had come through in 1852. And so they stood on this slate floor here and took the oath of loyalty to the United States. So this is why we're trying to preserve at least some of the slates themselves.
Lost 9 in the Civil War.
I regret that they never put up a monument for those who volunteered. We were one of the few towns that didn't do that. So that's one of my goals.
The church is pursuing a restoration project designed to ensure its long-term presence in the community, and more on that in a moment. But what makes the church even more interesting was its former dual role as both a place of worship and its role as a meeting house for more secular reasons. It was the place where earlier residents of Rupert gathered for March Town Meeting, until the former school building right next door was constructed in 1890. That building is now the town's Kitay Library. Reverend Stephen Berry is the current minister of the church, and he explained the close intersection of congregational faith and town meeting, which was interesting to learn about, as this year's town meeting season rolls around again.
What the Pilgrims did was they rejected the hierarchical church. That's why they've separated from the Church of England. The Puritans were less enamored of doing that. They wanted to reform the religion, they want to purify the religion, but they still love structure. And the Pilgrims didn't. The Pilgrims felt that every person should have a voice and a vote. And that's where your town meeting idea comes in. So in this building, which is a 1786 Rupert Meeting House, what you did was you have an altar here, and after a worship service, you would come and you take off the Bible, and you would take the Bible off. They didn't have candles, that was too elaborate. But they'd take the Bible off, and then this table would come out, and then they would call the meeting to order. And this is where town meeting would take place. But the town meeting was on the bottom floor at that time. This is raised up, but they also wanted to have a place where they could congregate, where they could eat meals, things like that, which they did. But the altar table would become then the meeting table for a town meeting. Town meeting originated in the congregational churches in New England, which were not, the structure, the building was the meeting house. The Quakers also called the meeting house Baptist meeting house, but the Congregationalists began it, and the meeting house essentially was a place where people met. It was also a place where people worshiped. It was also a place where people went to school and had fellowship, et cetera, et cetera. Now, it was the major meeting place in a town. So right now we have the meeting house here, which is the one and longest and continuous operation in Vermont, but they're scattered all over Vermont. All over New England you have the meeting houses, and they were multifunctional. It's before you had your town hall, before you had your town clerk's office, before you had any of that. This was the functional place for meeting and social events in the entire town of Rupert for, 75 years.
Yes.
And in other towns like Rupert across the state.
The church is undergoing a renovation project which is requiring an energetic fundraising effort as well. Jake Merrow was one of the craftsmen who was working on the building and has gotten an up-close view of it.
Architect, the skeleton of this frame is amazing to see. So when you climb up for the stairs into the belfry, you can look back and see the whole frame and how they built a chimney on brick on like a 22-degree angle all the way up through there is really fascinating. And it's quite all its own article. So it's something to be saved, absolutely.
With a bit of help, this longest-running church in Vermont will continue to offer its services and provide a link to an earlier chapter in the history of Rupert and Vermont. For the GNAT-TV News Project, I'm Andrew McKeever.